Let's listen to some wisdom, is this, right? So, welcome to this public lecture by Professor Achille Mbembe. We are very happy, honored to be here at Strathmore. So I think we will begin with the national anthem. So if we could please rise for the occasion. Colleagues, the national anthem.
Mungu nguvu yetu, ilete baraka kwetu, iwe ngao na mlinzi, na tukae na udugu, amani na uhuru, na tupate na ustawi. Mungu twaomba uilinde Jumuiya Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike. Umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
Thank you. Please have your seats. Welcome to this public lecture by Professor Achille Mbembe. Just a quick word on housekeeping. So we will have some welcoming remarks from our hosts in Strathmore. Then we'll invite Prof to deliver his lecture, after which point Dr. Antoinette Kankindi will give her reflections as a discussant. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. In about 2 hours, we will then head on for lunch, second floor at the Mara restaurant. Please note that the lavatories, the facilities in this building are ladies to the right, gents to the left. On the first floor, it is gents to the right, ladies to the left. On the second floor, it is ladies to the right, gents to the left. The guy who designed the building wanted to keep you thinking. It shouldn't be an easy task to go to the gents. Allow me to welcome Prof by reading his bio. Those of us in the academy know we like to make a public lecture is something of a pomp and circumstance. So permit me to read the longer version of who Prof is and what he has contributed to scholarship. Achille Mbembe is professor at WISA, the Ritz Institute for Social and Economic Research, and is founder of the new Innovation Foundation for Democracy. He was born in Cameroon, obtained his PhD in history at La Sorbonne in Paris in 1989, and a DEA in political science at the Institut des Études Politiques in Paris as well. He was assistant professor of history at Columbia, 1988 to 1991, a senior research fellow at the Brookings Institute in DC, 91 to 92, associate professor of history at the University of Pennsylvania, 92 to 96, executive secretary of the Council for the Development of Social Science and Research in Africa, CODESRIA, in Dakar, 96 to 2000. He was also visiting professor at the University of California, Berkeley in 2001, at Yale, 2003, at the University of California at Irvine, 2004-2005, and at Duke University, 2006-2011. Harvard 2012. I like this list. Prof, we should add a few Kenyan universities as well. He's the recipient of an honorary doctorate from the University of Paris 8 and Université Catholique du Louvain in Belgium. He has also held the Albert the Great Chair at the University of Cologne and was honorary professor at the Jakob Frege Zentrum University of Augsburg in Germany. He has been awarded numerous awards, including the 2025 Juicer Scholl Prize, I hope I said that right, and the 2018 Gerda Henkel Prize, 2018. He's co-founder of Les Ateliers de Pensée de Dakar and a major figure in the emergence of the wave of critical French theory. He has written extensively on contemporary politics and philosophy, including on the post-colony, 2001, Critique of Black Reason, 2016, Necropolitics, 2019, and Out of the Dark Night, Essays on Decolonization, 2020. His books have been written in French originally and translated to numerous other languages, including English, German, French, Portuguese, Italian, Dutch, Slovenian. Here I am calling on the Swahili scholars to talk to Prof on the side. Prof, with such an extensive and checkered history, we are very honored to be able to hear and listen to you. I would like at this juncture to welcome Dr. Lynette Asiemo, Director of Research at Strathmore Law School, to give us, to not only welcome us, but also welcome Prof to deliver his lecture. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. As you've heard, my name is Dr. Lynette Asiemo. I'm the Research Director at the Strathmore Law School. And I would like to, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to Strathmore University, and in a special way for those ones who are here for the first time. So a very warm welcome to each and every one of you, despite the chilly morning. I don't know if we should be blaming you for bringing us a chill. It hasn't been this cold in a while. And especially to our distinguished guest, Professor Achille Mbembe. So we are honored to host you today, and your presence here is a gift, and we look forward to the insights that you will share. Okay, I say a gift quite personally, because I was studying at Wits in Johannesburg for a number of years, and Prof, your name was quite of a household name. Yeah, we had it a lot. I was mostly on the corner of the West Campus at the law school, and you were on the East Campus, so we were separated by a modest hill that made it hard maybe sometimes to cross over and see what was happening on the other side. But we had, yeah. So that I had your name often. When I recently saw the flyer announcing that you would be speaking at Strathmore, I wondered if it was the same, the same name that I had had before, and I was happy to learn that indeed it was. And something that I discovered, because I knew from the name that you were not South African, and I assumed you were Zimbabwean. Many scholars came from Zimbabwe, but I now stand corrected, yeah, having read your remarkable biography. So, Prof, we know you will challenge us with profound questions and open new intellectual horizons to help us reflect more deeply about the world that we live in. Indeed, the contemporary conditions in which we find ourselves, marked by uncertainty, fracture, and inevitable interdependence, we, both as in our capacity as students or even just as Africans, must ask with you what kind of political, cultural, and educational work can strengthen the solidarity of humanity and all living things. Yeah, it's a question that you ask. And I wanted to tell you that here at Strathmore, we take such questions seriously. Yeah, education, solidarity, humanity, these are not abstract ideals for us. They are values we try to understand and to live by every day. Saint Josemaria Escrivá, whose vision inspired the founding of this university, understood university education as something far deeper than the mere accumulation of knowledge. For him, education was a call to pursue truth passionately, the truth about society, truth about the human person. Education was a call to form the whole person intellectually, morally, and spiritually. It was a call to integrate faith and reason in the search for meaning. It was a call to sanctify academic work, seeing our daily tasks, whether it's studies as student, our work as staff, or in the other capacities that we may have, done with care and diligence as a path to holiness. And also, education was a call to transform society through competent and virtuous leadership. And so for us, education is not simply the awarding of a degree. Our students are not defined merely by the accolades they earn in sports, or in debates, or in moot court competitions for the law school. We have been bagging every trophy in the recent past, literally, nationally and internationally, or by the excellence of the many other things that we do, either the law review that they publish every year, and many other accolades, although we are immensely proud of this. But education for us is a process of drawing out the best in each person who passes through our halls. Success is not measured solely by professional achievements, but by the character, the insight, the sense of responsibility that the students carry with them when they leave our institution. We strive to engage each student as a unique individual, hoping in that encounter to call forth their best. So at Strathmore we pursue excellence, but we believe that excellence must rest on a foundation of purpose, integrity, and service. It is this excellence, or this kind of excellence that will produce the kind of students and future graduates and professionals who are able to grapple with the tough questions you are inviting us to ponder. And so, Professor Mbembe, we welcome you in the spirit of Strathmore and what we stand for. You will speak today to us about weighty things, and we are ready to listen, not only with our minds, but our imaginations, our hearts, and our shared longing for a better world. We are especially grateful for what your presence means to our students, I hope I trust that many of them would be listening online. And that is an invitation to stretch their thinking and widen their sense of what is possible. Because I must also say that we are grateful for the partnership with the International Commission of Jurists for co-hosting this event, and we also warmly welcome you to our campus today. Then I would especially like to thank Dr. Kankindi and the Integrity Program that she leads for taking charge of the planning for today's event. Thank you very much for all you have done to make this day possible. Okay, now it is my distinct honor to invite Professor Mbembe to the floor. One of the most original and influential voices of our time. Professor Mbembe, welcome. The floor is yours.
I would like to thank the university and the authorities of the university. I'm very happy to be here. I think that Strathmore University is fast becoming a key reference in the African academic landscape. This is thanks to the quality of the education that you deliver here. It's also thanks to the spirit which undergird this educational project, which, as you have just explained, is itself grounded on the promise to open up the students to the wholeness of what they can become. I think that this kind of ethics of education is what we need right now, not only in our own continent, but also in a world which, as we can see, is saddled with different forms of fracturation. I would also like to thank Antoinette, the ICG Kenya, and see Eric is here, Julie is here too. I came here with colleagues of mine, Dr. Makon, Dr. Sigun, Sheptum, who is now part of the family of the foundation, and Nandi, Naila, and Eve, who have helped to make the event of the last 3 days possible. I'm not going to give a lecture as such. In any case, it won't be peppered with the usual academic citations we expect from this kind of gathering. I will try to think aloud, hopefully with you. Think aloud about a question that has been at the heart of the work we have been doing at the foundation for the last 2 to 3 years. This is, of course, the question of what a substantive democracy might look like in our own continent, Africa. When I say substantive democracy, I use this term in contrast to other forms of democracy we know about. Of course, liberal democracy in its classical sense, which, as we know, is premised on at least 2 core values, let's call them that way. The value of the individual as the ground for history making, most of the times in the absence of any transcendent power. The idea that we are in the world on our own, and the aspiration for freedom. Freedom expressed in 2 figures in particular. On the one hand, the figure of the citizen who participates in the making of the polis. The term polis is a Greek term which means the political community. And the figure of the entrepreneur who contributes to the production of the material resources necessary for the working of a community. So you have that model of democracy which has found its manifestation, its expression, in particular in the Western world. Although even in that very Western world, its institutional translations and the cultures that undergird it are somewhat different. I have to add to that, in this idea of liberal democracy, the importance of equality, in the sense that democracy is a community of equals. Of course, equality in this sense, the principle of equality, doesn't mean that there are no social differentiations within the community. The principle of equality does not mean that class struggle is not unfolding or that inequalities do not exist. But equality is both a foundation and a horizon without which there is no democracy. So the principle of equality, the principle of deliberation, that common matters concerning the community, the political community, have to be debated in public. Which means that each voice has to be heard. Of course, before it is heard, it has to be expressed. Thus, the importance of a whole set of freedoms, starting with the freedom of expression, the freedom of thought, academic freedoms, as far as universities are concerned, if you want the sanctuarization of a set of rights and obligations no government can impinge upon, which therefore become the vehicles for the development of a democratic ethos. So deliberation, of course, it means the freedom to assemble, the freedom to protest in case we are not in agreement with what is being proposed, the guarantee that we can protest freely in public, all of that, of course, in public, the separation of the public sphere and the private sphere, the sphere of the market, and the sphere of, let's say, the civic sphere, if you want to call it in that way. So you have a whole set of implications which derive precisely from these basic principles. Key to liberal democracy is also the principle of choice, starting with the selection of who is to govern. You cannot just govern because you have decided to do so. You cannot govern because you have a gun and your neighbor doesn't have a gun. You govern because you have been elected. And those who have been elected can be revoked through the process of accountability, in the sense that you have to be accountable for the actions which are undertaken during the time when you rule, precisely because those actions have to be taken not in your own name, but in the name of those who have elected you. So you have a whole series of principles which, on which liberal democracy is founded, which, if you ask me, are good for everyone. I do believe that they are valid for every individual. In that sense, they have a potential of universalization, in the sense that they can be extended to every single human being, of course translated institutionally in as many different forms as possible, but these values and principles are universal, and they are translatable, if you want to use such a term, which somewhat relativizes the constant permanent controversy about the African or non-African character of democracy per se. By saying this, I'm not arguing for mimicry. I'm not saying that we should just go and look at what's going on in the West, grab it and come and implement it here wholesale without any critical appraisal. What I'm saying is that in those key principles of equality, of rights, obligations, and so forth and so on, there is something which is universal. And therefore, we are both philosophically or practically entitled to benefit from it and translate it into the, let's say, protocols, cultural and otherwise, of our own societies. So when I talk about substantive democracy, it's not to deride liberal democracy in what it has of universal. Is to say that we have to move beyond that. Moving beyond means supplementing it if you want. You have to supplement, add to what it has at its core. So, part of what I want to do this morning is to show how we can, what is it that we can add to the tenets, key tenets of liberal democracy, if we think about it, or democracy in general, from our own continent and its history and its traditions, which, as we know, are multiple. There is not one single African tradition. They are multiple traditions. And that pluralism, we have to recognize it, in fact, as constitutive of what Africa is all about. Africa is about multiplicity. Whatever you take, it comes in many, many different forms. Forms of marriage, currencies, religions. It always comes in a whole variety of assortments. And one key drama of our encounter precisely with the West lies in this confrontation between multiplicity on the one hand and unicity on the other. Unicity in the West being driven in particular, but not solely, in particular by monotheistic religions and the belief in the power of the one, which is very different from our own metaphysical predispositions and our anthropological texture, which once again accommodates multiplicity. So, what I would like to do is to offer a set of reflections on this question of substantive democracy in a context characterized by the rise of concerns worldwide about two things. Concerns about sustainability and concerns about durability. The relationship between sustainability and durability being in it of itself a question, of course, we can explore at length. But clearly, two key questions are today at the center of reflections from those who are worried about our present, our future, the future of humanity at large, as far as this future of humanity is related to the future of the planet. And in this debate concerning the future of the human and the future of the planet, Africa has something absolutely unique to contribute. And I will say a few things about what is that thing unique we can bring to this planetary debate, if you want. The presupposition here being that we are not a continent apart of the world, we are integral to the world, of which we share a part of responsibility. And I don't have to assume our part of responsibility in relation to the world. This itself is a major statement because in modern thinking, Africa has been understood as that which is apart from the rest. So what I'm saying is that we have to turn that assumption upside down and replace the continent politically and intellectually at the center of what it is that the world is becoming. And we'll discover that, in fact, to a certain extent, the future of the planet is played out in the continent in a way we haven't really properly thought about. That the future of the planet might ultimately depend on what is happening here. So I hope you see more or less the kinds of assumptions that are behind this attempt at thinking aloud with you. Now, one might wonder why it is that concerns about sustainability and durability, why is it that these concerns, I hear myself coming from, I don't know who is recording the event, but don't worry about that. The thing is, one might wonder why it is that concerns about sustainability and durability, why are they gaining such a central position in contemporary critique? Why? The reason is pretty simple. But let me put it this way. You see, in the thinking, in, let's say, modern criticism, let's just use that generic sense, term. In the ways of thinking of the West, which have dominated the entire world, the world of thinking of the West are no longer just Western. Because of colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism, they have extended all over the world. In those ways of thinking, in fact, for a long time, the earth, when I say the earth with capital E, you can say the planet, the terrestrial planet, the one on the grounds of which we stand. I mean, that's quite something that we we haven't really thought about philosophically, that we stand on this ground. Even when we sit, I mean, I see Eric sitting, but his legs are grounded somewhere. So the earth is that on which we stand, which sustains us, on the basis of which the vertical position we came to assume at a certain period of our evolutionary history comes from that. So we can derive from the concept of the earth a whole set of things. So the belief in modern criticism, or even pre-modern criticism too, the belief was that, in fact, the earth was a prison. The earth, just like the body, were prisons, were carceral entities, if you want. If you read the work of a very important theologian who has influenced doctrine of the church for a long, Augustine. Just look at his book, Confessions. Look at what St. Paul himself tells us about the flesh. The flesh as a carceral entity in which the soul is imprisoned. Salvation in this manner having to do precisely with the liberation of the soul from the inertia of the flesh. The earth was seen precisely in the same terms, in the geography of salvation, as that from which we should escape. So, the dominant reading of the earth was of the earth as a prison. If you look at African cosmogonies, our deep mythologies and legends, and I have been studying over the last few years, for instance, the cosmogonies of a very important community in Mali called the Dogon. A people who had been the object of the work of a huge tradition of anthropologists and historians. So it's not as if the text didn't exist. The texts are there. They have been recorded. I promise you that I wouldn't give you any citation. I'm sorry to break that promise. Let me just give you one. The work of Marcel Griol, a French anthropologist. It's called Conversations with Ogotemeli. Conversation avec Ogotemeli in French. The book is called Dieu d'eau, and translatable, I imagine, in English. There is a collection, a recording, not a collection, a recording, a systematic recording of Dogon ancient philosophies by these anthropologists over a period, I think, of 15 days, non-stop. Come in the morning, sit down. Ogotemeli tells him about the philosophies of the Dogon. He records them, transcribes them, and he puts them in a book. So we do have the material. So we can study these cosmogonies. I mentioned the Dogon, but there are many other such texts. We have to call them texts in the classical sense of the term. So, if you study those cosmogonies and you look into what it is that they tell us about the earth, which, as I have said, in the Western cosmogonies, to brackets, is seen as a prison. Is it the same thing in Dogon's text? Of course, no. No, because in Dogon cosmogonies, the earth is an open system, endless opening. It is an open system which is to be placed within the cosmic ecology of the solar system. That's why, for instance, the Dogons were extremely interested in the world, le monde des planètes, the world of planets, extraterrestrial planets, the world of astronomy, that's the term. And this is not a legend. They developed astronomical knowledge, which has then been studied later on by specialists of a very high quality, which helped them to predict the turn of the seasons, the work of the sun, exactly in the same manner as in Egypt, where the sun was absolutely central in the cosmic imagination of the universe. So the earth is not a prison. It's an open system which itself has to be placed within this cosmic ecology. It is to be placed within this cosmic ecology by human beings, or to use the proper category, human persons, because the term being, in fact, it's an Aristotelian term, comes from Greek philosophy, where in our systems of thought, we think in terms of persons. We think in terms of personhood, in terms of entities which are pliable, which are plastic, which are open-ended, which are in fact hybrid forms, in the sense that they are the result of the concatenation of multiple elements, of multiplicity once again. And it is the relation of the various elements within this multiplicity which matter. It's not the identity of one single entity. That is why in old African systems of thought, relation is more important than ontology. Ontology being, of course, the discourse on what it means to be. Because we don't believe in one definitive identity. When I look at Julie this morning, I say, this is who Julie is all about. It's not possible, because Julie is in a permanent process of becoming. So, becoming as opposed to being. That's the big line of demarcation, which we see, of course, has consequences of all kinds, in terms of relations to each other, in terms of how you build a community, in terms of our relationship with nature, or what is called nature, the environment, our milieu de vie. So once in a while, when I can't translate it, I will use the French term, and then by the time you get out of here, each of you will have acquired at least one word in French. But by milieu de vie, I mean those milieus where we live, which sustain our life and our modes of coexistence. And the milieu de vie are, of course, water, food, all these basic ingredients without which life is not at all possible, even less so sustainable, in any case, not at all durable. So, to put it in one one word. Let's say, the making of a political community in our African cosmogonies is entirely ordained to a superior objective, which is the sustenance of life. There's no power, there's no political community without life at its center. Everything else is a utensil of life. Everything else, including objects, tools, all of that converge towards making life emerge, nurturing it, sustaining it, redistributing it as equally as possible, so as to make it durable. Because of the high consciousness that life is fragile, it is vulnerable, and that the fact of coming together in a relation, which is the matter of democracy, the coming together, the putting together of all energies and forces, all of that is justified by the law of life. You can put it in that manner, the obligation of life. So we can renew democracy. We can rekindle democratic imagination if, in addition to all the principles I mentioned early on, most of which, once again, are predicated on the individual, if we inject them into the debate. A debate which is African, of course, but which is universal, which is a planetary debate, since the key issue, which is concerning all of us at this point in time, has to do with the ecological crisis we are facing. The possibility that the earth might become not a prison, but truly uninhabitable. The problem of habitability, of hospitality, that the earth, whose main characteristic all along has been to exhibit radical hospitality, in the sense that you find in it everything. It is the only place where everything is welcomed. There's no visa for plants, fish, none of that. There's nothing like that. It is open-ended in terms of its radical hospitality, unconditional hospitality. So this question of unconditionality is absolutely central. We can reinvigorate debates on borders in our vast continent, 30 million square kilometers, saddled with, 54 states, each with 3-4 borders, checkpoints. Nobody can move. To go from Nairobi to Dakar on the other side, you spend, if not a whole day, sometimes 18 hours. All of that at a time when all over the world, Africans are not welcomed. So doubly penalized from the outside as well as from the inside. That we can't move freely inside our own continent. Visas and all the trappings brought by colonialism, which we wear and exhibit as markers of some pseudo-sovereignty. So how do we dismantle those borders? How come in 1964, at the institution of the OAU, of course, maybe for justified reasons, we agreed with the principle of intangibility of borders inherited from colonialism. But is it really something we want to hold on today? At a time when the world is being reconfigured, we see it going on through major entities collaborating, putting together their resources, and rearming themselves, since we are now in the age of rearmament. You go to Europe right now, they only talk about how to re-engineer armament industries for a war we hope won't be final, but they all believe that is coming. So how do we right ourselves within that evolving new world? A world in which access to rare materials is absolutely key for the shift to a new economic global system governed by artificial intelligence and all the resources of the digital. A world in which indeed the raw materials for sustaining such a shift, a planetary shift to a new redistribution of world resources, most of them, or in any case some of them, are with us, not far from here, in the Eastern Congo, for instance, where over the last 10, 15 years, millions of people have been killed. How do we explain that? And now, as we speak, they are all running to Qatar or whatever place that is to achieve appearance of a peace nobody believes in. Why is it not being done here in Nairobi? Why Qatar? We have to ask those questions and take responsibility for ourselves in that regard, intellectually, politically, and in doing so, take responsibility for the world and for the planet. So, that is one way in which we can contribute, I think, from a position of strength to planetary concerns about sustainability, durability, and the habitability of our planet. So, as you can see, in this age of climatic disorder, in any case, this disorder, this chaos, climatic chaos, ecological chaos, has forced us somewhat to close in a bit more on the terrestrial inner atmospheric geology, ecology of our existence. All of this has forced us somewhat to take seriously the question of our tenure on earth. That we are tenants, basically. We are tenants on earth. We are not all the owners of the earth. We are tenants in the true sense of the term, that you are given responsibility over something to protect it, nurture it, make sure that when you pass it on to those who come after you, it's in a far better shape. So the question of our tenure on earth as in fact the most important political question of our time. And that in that sense, in the sense of our tenure on earth, our philosophical, cosmological traditions have much more to say than the desiccated epistemologies which came to us through colonialism, imperialism, and racism. So that's the intellectual turnaround that we have to do. But to do it requires discipline, method, openness to all traditions, capacity to read, as opposed to some of what I hope this is not what's happening here at Strathmore University, where students come to you and tell you, oh, you see, professor, I really don't want to read so-and-so. And ask them, but why don't you want to read so-and-so? And they will tell you, I feel really uncomfortable. No. Who do you want to read? And tell you, I want to read Fanon. I want to read Karl Marx. Or not even Marx, but Nkrumah. I want to read Cabral, Sankara, and all of that. Of course, it's important to read Sankara. But you know what? You want to read Fanon. Do you know who Fanon was in conversation with? You can't read Fanon if you have no knowledge of his debates with Jean-Paul Sartre. You cannot read him if you have no understanding of his contention with Freud or Merleau-Ponty and many others. So what you have to inherit, as he himself said, is the library of the whole world. It's not a particular ghettoized library. It's an embrace of the world at large in its multiplicity. So you see here once again the concept of multiplicity, which is so central to our history, which has been repressed. We have to re-engage with it in a political, aesthetic, economic, and artistic new endeavor. All in the service of, let's say, new forms of imaginations of the world in which we live. So, this question of paying attention to the multiple tangles that enable planetary survival is absolutely, this question is important. It is important if somewhat we rediscover that, as old Africans knew so well, that life on Earth might be our last concrete utopia. And this is really an important point. At a time when we are looking for solutions to what is clearly an impasse, what we see in the United States of America unfolding right now, it's an impasse. If we look into the ways in which great powers, great capitalist monopolies are leading us towards an impasse, and we ask ourselves, where do we go looking for resources for taking other paths, then rediscovering our own archives, our own library, as Valentin Mudimbe used to call it, all of that is the first step to make. Is it what some call decolonization? It might, provided that we give to the term decolonization its radical meaning. Provided that decolonization is not just a slogan which is used for compensatory purposes, if you want. Provided that decolonization is read in the ways in which its first theoreticians understood it. Here again, Fanon. Creation of something new, radically new, although tied to, once again, the tangles of relations which tie us with many other living entities and persons. So, if you want, the future of humanity is becoming firmly tied to the earth. And the earth is seen again as the last, and in fact, here Antoinette might not agree with me, but that's a discussion we can pursue later on, the only refuge for human species. And when I say human species, it's in relation to other species, because that's also what we find in examining the Dogon mythology, for instance, that there's no human species as such. Human species is fundamentally in relation with others. You don't exist as such. You exist in relation to others in a process of becoming, and for humans, the process of becoming an ancestor. So what we see today, and I'll probably end here because I still have some time. Okay. Oh, okay, so I can talk, not infinitely, but now I forget what I was talking about. You exist in relation to, in a tangle, embedded in, let's say, inscribed in a process of becoming, so for becoming an ancestor, for instance. So I was saying that what we see today with the modes of rule which predominate in our countries is the fact that a class of people, a class of gerontocrats, old people in general, but also some young people, because it's not just a matter of old people. I mean, you go to Mali, you go to Senegal, you go to Burkina Faso, they are pretty young. And they are in their 40s. So it's not just a matter of gerontocracy. But the gerontocratic principle, you find it in the heads of and the minds of biologically young people. It's universally shared, if you want. The gerontocratic principle and the patriarchal principle. Since the two always go together. Totally inseparable. So what you witness is that a class of the gerontocrates, let's just give them that name, is making it very difficult today for anyone to become an ancestor. To become an ancestor means to be accountable to those who come after you, whom you might never ever meet. It's the obligation one has in relation to what is to come. But they are making it impossible for many to achieve that status. They block the mechanisms of social reproduction and social recognition through a whole variety of strategies and tactics we know so well about. Beginning, of course, with misrule, the privatization of state power, the brutalization of the society, its domination by men in arms, whether they belong to a formal army or a militia or any entity, including private armies, mercenaries paid on the basis of resources taken from our own continent. A generalization of violence as a modality of non-relation. So, we have to bring down the levels of violence in our continent as a precondition for everything else. That force and coercion cannot be the basis for any meaningful relation. In any case, it cannot be the basis for a community of life, which is the other name of substantive democracy. Substantive democracy is a community of life in fidelity to precisely the old African archive I am advocating we should revisit. So we have to bring those levels of violence down from the domestic sphere to the continental sphere, between nations, states, in Sudan, in the Eastern Congo, in the Sahel region, because we won't go far if modes of rule are predicated on who owns a gun and who doesn't. We'll go very far if modes of rules are predicated on the transformation of all that we have into utensils of life. Thus, the connection between democracy and general creation, if you want. Let's call it general creation, as opposed to general destruction, which is not at all a work of chance, which is orchestrated by forces within ourselves and outside of our own purview, so as to make the continent weak. Because by making it weak, by turning it into an operation zone or theater, it can be better exploited. But the price to pay for that is extremely high. It's genocidal, if you want. Slow genocide. Since we are now back, unfortunately, into genocidal wars, as we see in Gaza. So, as you can see, these are very serious matters. I just wanted to introduce a way of thinking aloud about them so that they become part of our intellectual, political, aesthetic, economic agenda, so that they become part of the everyday struggle we initiate on behalf of democracy in our continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof, for this mind-opening, passionate lecture. As we have all witnessed it, it comes not just from his mind, but from his being. It's very much his force vital. Thank you, Prof. I'm struck by this term that you were trying to translate, milieu de vie, which is, I think, is more than just, which is testament to the lecture. It's more than just environment. It's more like places of life. Almost like if it speaks to what the environment should be, what it must be. you also speak about us being in relation with, and it reminds me of Benezet Bujo, the Congolese theologian, who in his book, The Ethical Dimensions of Community, reminds us that the Bantu languages lack the word for possession. In this part of the world, the root word for possession, as we see it in Swahili, comes from the Arabic milk, which lacks in the Bantu languages. And if I want to say, I have this bottle of water, I literally say, I am with this bottle of water. If I want to say, I have a car, I literally say in Swahili and other Bantu languages, I am with the object. And there is no distinction between relation to an object and a person. I am with you, and I am with water. So thank you, Prof. I would probably invite you to probably take a seat as I invite Dr. Antoinette. I can imagine.
I leave my computer.
Yes, because you come for question and answers. Yes. Allow me to invite Dr. Antoinette Kankindi to present her reflections on the lecture as a discussant. Prof has already hinted at what you agree and disagree. We very much welcome you to hear your views. Dr. Antoinette Kankindi, please welcome here so we can use the mic. She's a senior lecturer at Strathmore University, director of the Integrity Program, and she will be speaking to us on her thoughts on Prof's views. Thank you.
All right, this is a tall order. So I'll first do the same thing to thank Professor Achille Mbembe for honoring us with his presence here. This university is a relatively young university and it's still small, but it has this great ambition of slowly contributing to building knowledge and opening horizons for intellectual debate that can be of great help to advance I would say the good of this country, the region, and possibly the continent. So it stands for very specific values, and Dr. Osiemo has mentioned them, and I will just add the fact that we really believe that knowledge is for the good. That's not something we have invented. Plato has elaborated on it in the Republic, and don't worry, I will not take you there. So we believe that, but the reason why I'm putting that across immediately is because today all you hear is that knowledge is power. Yeah? But power is always a means to something. It cannot and should not be an end in itself. So if knowledge is power, it is power for what? Yeah, for achieving what? And that's why I think it's good to say the power for achieving what is right. And that addresses one point that the professor mentioned about the fragmentation we are experiencing in the society today. It's a fragmentation that is coming from the fragmentation of knowledge. And knowledge became fragmented when it stopped aiming at the good. Because even when we say it's about the truth, it's the truth about the good. Because the truth is not an empty concept. Yeah. So, but I also don't want to go there, but I wanted to mention, in case it escaped our mind when he mentioned the fragmentation we see in our... So then I think before I move, I have to also acknowledge not just my university, but also the institutions that have made this possible. Yeah. The foundation that is starting its interesting work in the region from Nairobi. I think it's an honor that the institution has chosen this, our corner of the world, to push for constructive dialogue. Yeah. And from the foundation, I think I can acknowledge Dr. Richard Marcon and, of course, my very own former student, Cheptum. This past 4 days, I'm feeling like a very proud mother to see my Cheptum. See Cheptum doing this. It's unbelievable the kind of relationship that the teachers establish with the students. Maybe not all of them, but some of them. So I feel very proud to have Cheptum playing such a fundamental role in the first step of the foundation's work in Kenya and in the region. And also, of course, we want to acknowledge the representatives of the International Council of Jurists, Mr. Eric Makoya, that I almost called Eric Magoha. I told him earlier on. And Julie Wayua, thank you very much, and welcome to Strathmore anytime. Yeah. Thank you. So I also have to thank our friend of the law school and colleague Humphrey Sipala, and debate partner on matters democracy and other things. So thank you very much and welcome all of you. Now, I think I have out of the 10 minutes I have already used 5, forgive me. So I want to mention a few things that the professor mentioned because, and I'll start with the one he thought I would disagree with him, because I don't disagree with him, I agree with him, that the future of humanity is tied to the Earth. And my point on this is simply because Earth is the planet of life. And there are living beings, like the flowers here, and so it's our common home. Yeah. But I love the connection he made from a consideration of democracy to the concern for our common home. I will not add much to what he said. I will only, because we are in Kenya, mention something that is very dear to my heart. That is how the pastoralist communities in this country are very ecologically savvy. They have a very specific relationship with the earth and the seasons and the life that make up their livelihood, and they have an understanding of climate matters that our scientists might not have. And we are brushing off their knowledge, and now we are saddling them with bigger problems in terms of carbon credit markets. Sounds familiar on where we are trying to take them, yeah. And we are not trying to understand and gather in the archives of our cosmogonies, yeah, what they know about this and how their practices are more protective of our ecosystem than the carbon credit market. I'm sorry to say, you can shoot me. You are allowed to. You can shoot me. All right, so that's just to dispel the fact that I do not disagree with Professor Mbembe about the Earth being our home. It is now and in the future. I was listening to the discussion Peter Thiel of Palantir and partner of Elon Musk was having about he is disappointed that Elon Musk is not pushing for the conquest of Mars, because I'm shocked Elon Musk is doesn't believe anymore in conquering Mars. Yeah. So, okay, I'm like, you billionaires, you can conquer it, go there and leave us here because this is our place. So I do not disagree, Professor, but then I would like to highlight a few things. Yeah. Regarding the problematic concept of democracy, I love the definition he gave us as a community of equals, but almost automatically, this number of questions come to my mind from that same idea. The first issue is that even Rousseau had seen that the biggest problem of democracy is going to be the question of representation. He raised the question, but did not answer it. How did he raise the question? That the problem is once you represent something or someone, the biggest danger is that you will easily represent yourself instead of the person you're supposed to be representing. And that's what we have seen happening with the political party systems, that the representatives of the people end up becoming representatives of some specific interests. I put them under the general umbrella of vested interests, to call them something. Yeah? And this is the biggest problem that introduces inequality in the community of equals. So when you push that introduction of inequality in the community of equals, you see that the current democracies as we see them have become just the system that allows a small so-called elite. I don't even know whether the concept of elite is adequate for that because I don't know how elite they are. I mean, they take over, and that's we cannot really even save the concept of equality in democracy as it appears today. Then, in that the same threats against the community of equals, we can raise the one of money. Cheptum says, money talks. Yeah? And it talks, but it talks so loudly, right? And so forcefully, yeah? That sometimes I fear that the contemporary democracy needs so much money that you can, in many instances, say that it seems to need corruption to survive. Yeah, and that really, when money comes through this discourse, we can no longer speak about a community of equals. Then the next thing that comes in is a matter of classes, right? It's a matter of classes because in this country, in this city, not the country, in this city, you can see the distinction between people who live on one side of Uhuru Highway and the other side of Uhuru Highway, right? And see, let me not go into details because I think Kenyans understand what I mean, but money establishes immediately social classes that become like us against them. And you can see how they push, for example, for things that look like progressive and in nice, like gated communities, the Kansas cities, and I don't know what. It's like we are going to fence ourselves in, which means we are fencing everyone else out. So then we cannot really talk about communities of equals. Yeah, it's very hard to make that real, and that when this possibility of a community of equals disappears or disintegrates, then the pluralism of our traditional African community cannot survive anymore because you can have, I've discussed this with some of my students, like, okay, these people who live in this type of area, you can have relatives coming from the countryside, yeah, but they can't get into your home, and you put them in the servants' quarters. As something that is real, we've seen, right? How can, if that happens already at the level of family, imagine what it will happen at the. So we've killed with this modern democracy, even the things I call like the major values of African cultures, which the professor mentioned also, the solidarity. Yeah. Our solidarity still survives because we cannot bury our people alone. We always organize harambes to be able to bury our people or to marry our sons and daughters. Yeah. But that's what is left. Many other dimensions of that solidarity have disappeared. The hospitality that we had all our homes open, I think in the countryside to some extent is still there, but not in the cities. Yeah, so, all right. So I found that the threats to the community of equal are real, and so then the last, like the consequence of these threats is the most like striking of them is the mistrust in anything we call democratic institutions. The people no longer trust neither the concept of democracy nor the institutions itself created. Okay. That's one point on the communities of equals. The second one is, he said something beautiful. I love to hear that, understanding so as not to copy and paste. So the problem is that we are very busy copying and pasting. Yeah. But this is, I think, the key strengths that universities could still build. Let's explain, let's unpack everything like the professor did here for us to be able to understand so that we can chart a better path. Yeah? By we giving ourselves time to understand, to study, to dig around the concept and demystify some slogans. And yeah. So I think this is a task to all of us rather than anything else, to understand so as not to copy and paste. Then I'll raise one more point, which I think maybe I could link it to what the professor was telling us about the borders, the countries in Africa. The problem is that we want to be sovereign nations, right? We want to be sovereign nations, and we are trying. But I see the problem of democracy and sovereignty, like at war today because of the power of global policies that undermine the sovereignty. And those policies are stronger than domestic policies. And so to the point that we start now asking ourselves if the representative democracy loses legitimacy because of the interests it serves, and then we have global policies dictating what happens within a sovereign nation, do we have any ground for any legitimacy anymore? In the university, in this setup, we can debate these things, but how can we really push the debate outside the classroom, outside the conference, so that we can see, can we take the commitment to defend that sovereignty? Or we have stopped believing in it because the global powers are so forceful that now we think what they decide is what we have to follow. I'll go back to the pastoralist community now because of the climate discourse going round. Yeah, we can't find our own solutions from the archive our cosmogonies and how to deal with this, we have to go with what the UN says, with what, I don't know, Greta Thunberg says, and I don't know who else. And then I would like to kind of throw it out there. Do we want to fight for our sovereignty? Or have we given up? And if we have given up, can we ever find any ground for any legitimacy whatsoever? So I think those are, I also liked what Professor said about decolonization having to be radical, because I think we use the concept too easily, but we are not really pushing for it to be what it should be. I think sometimes we are very comfortable with the colonization. Sometimes I think we are begging for it. Yeah. Like if we really don't trust that our pastoralist communities understand the ecosystem better, yeah, and they understand how to live alongside the wildlife, yeah, then we'll believe what some activist from I don't know which country says, that we have a conflict between the wildlife and our people. But they have been for years and years. They know how to cross the national parks with their livestock, and they know how to confuse the sense of smell of animals. So that we have a lot here, but so how are we? The concept radical is an adjective that scares people off, but it comes from the Latin word radix, which means root. Yeah, it's grounded. So the colonization should be really grounded, which means it should be radical. Yeah, so maybe it should start. The decolonizing that should start should be the one of decolonizing our sovereignty, I think. Yeah. I don't know whether Sipala is going to say no. The last thing, maybe this is the only point I did not agree with the professor about, when he was saying that we are tenants on this earth. I think we are stewards. I think we are stewards. Because if you are tenant, I don't know. I'm just thinking about my landlord and your house. I think the mission we have in relation to our common home is the mission of stewardship. Thank you. I think this microphone can be used for questions.
Yes, I think there's some.
Yes.
So, Prof, we are heading into the Q&A session. We have about 30 or so minutes, slightly more for the Q&A, so that we'll have an excellent opportunity to engage Prof Mbembe a bit more on his points and hear from him. I would venture to suggest, Prof, that I take the first round of 3 questions, and then you could make your responses to Dr. Kankindi and answer the questions, and then we'll take more until the time is up. So I'm happy to open to conversation. The first round, we will start on this side. So Ivy Knight, if we may. Ivy, we will start with the lady at the back. As it were, right? So let me just point out the other 2, the first round, please. So Ivy Ha, Tamei here, and the gentleman. Please remind me. Jorge. Yes, and then we'll come round again.
Sorry.
Please, yes. Do at least state your name so that Prof may be able to respond.
Thank you very much. My name is Sarah. I'm from Kenya. I am very thankful for the lecture as well as the response. I have a couple of questions, if you would allow me. One of the questions that I have is around the cost of democracy, and I really wouldn't call what we have in Kenya democracy. I don't think it ever has been. But the cost of what we presume to be either becoming or on its way towards, I don't know. But I don't think that we have ever done a serious intellectual exercise of understanding what the cost has been every 5 years. And partly why I think this is problematic is because I don't know that we have ever had an actual transition from the logic of the colonial state to what we have now. Because what was the logic of the colonial state is that confluence of power and wealth. A very small minority has the power and the wealth, and they lock it in. And you really can't get into that. Right now, I think a couple years ago, Sakaja, our governor, was asked how much it costs to run for governorship. And I don't know whether he was mentioning his race or another race or just theoretically, but he mentioned $5 million. And there's no way anyone has that sort of money, legitimately. There's just no way. So it is the barrier to entry into our politics as of now is completely impossible, other than the reality that we have what I think is a confluence of an oligarchy and a kleptocracy. Because unless you actually are in the business of stealing public coffers, you cannot have the money that it takes to run the public PR exercise that it is to do a campaign. So for me, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether it would be worth anything trying to actually figure out the cost of it. The cost in terms of life, anticipated loss of life, because we can anticipate, even with the protests, that we will lose life, we will lose property. So I'm curious about that, because I don't think you can vote out a kleptocracy, and I don't think you can vote out an oligarchy, and I struggle with that, in the same way that we could not vote out the colonial government. It just wasn't possible. So I think we're faced with a very similar concern, which was, access to the means of production. That's one. The second thing that I would like to know from you is whether we have the possibility of epistemic freedom, this intellectual freedom. So our initial fight was for land and means of production. And I think we sort of stopped there with our sovereignty, we have our flag up. But I really wonder whether we have, maybe with the absence of USAID, because I think mimicry was enforced. We didn't have a choice. You had to do this copy-paste. It had budgets behind it and logic behind it. So in the absence of this and the crumbling of this, these Western hegemonic ways of thinking, I will ask myself, is there space now for epistemic freedom? Can Africans pursue that as a way to move us into deeper sovereignty? So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Please. Thank you, Ivy Knight. To the next two questions, short and sweet.
Hi, Prof. I have two, stand up. My name is Kanyere Kariuki. I have two very simple questions. I couldn't resist the urge. The topic today was about forces of life, but your work before has dealt with the forces of death. And international law at its heart started with the bracketing of war, which it called the highest relation between states. What is a radical way, since we've talked about radical, that can we reimagine politics not as the politics of death, but the politics of life? And the second question is, there's a part in your lecture where you talked about the human being versus human personhood. The law doesn't recognize human beings. The law only recognizes persons. It's only a person who can hold rights, it's only a person who can own property, and it's only a person who can be stripped of that personhood and become a slave. How then do we smuggle back our humanity into the law? And I use the word smuggle because it was also stripped away very subtly.
Good morning. Thank you, Prof, for the talk. Thank you, Professor, for the response. Illuminated indeed. My name is Jorge Campos. I'm a citizen of Mexico, but I've been in Kenya and East Africa for the past since 2009. I'm very bad at math. I'm an anthropologist, so probably math is not my strength. Anyway, The question that I wanted to raise is actually an attempt to bring back some of the conversations that we had during the past 3 days regarding the nitty-gritty of the work of the foundation. So the last concept that you gave us, Professor, when you were closing your talk was the utensils of life, turning everything we have into utensils of life. And I want to connect this with the specific administrative procedure that elections have become in contemporary democracies. So besides the typical elements that we think, like financial autonomy, transparency, very specific time limits for the democratic procedures, besides those typical reform packages that we think enabling elections to become truly transparent, besides those, I would invite you to speak a little bit more in a risky way into the ways in which we can turn elections into utensils of life. I'm trying to bridge here the gap that is usually presented between theory and practice, which to begin with, I don't think it exists. So in what ways can we do that? Elections as utensils of life. And then if there's time, I would like to raise a question for the respondent, Professor Antoinette. This relationship between sovereignty and the community of life. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about that. Is the sovereign, or the figure of the sovereign, in whatever materializations we may find it, an enabler of this new invitation to attain or to strive towards a community of life? Or perhaps the figure of the sovereign is too attached to earlier figures of death? So just an invitation to reflect on that. Thank you. As
As Prof is coming, for our online audience, please write out your questions on the chat, and we will pick out a few and share with Prof.
First of all, I would like to thank Antoinette for her comments and the many different paths she opened up, as well as the suggestions she put forward for deepening the inquiry. So I'm not really responding to her as such, or to all of those who have questions. I'll just try to think exactly in the same vein as we try to properly frame the issues and look for possible avenues of exploration. I agree with Antoinette on the huge reservoir of knowledge which exists, in particular within our pastoralist or so-called nomadic communities. And this touches, of course, a huge part of our continent. Let's say from the Atlantic coast in West Africa up to Djibouti, and coming down to here. The reality is one of, to a large extent, of circulation and itinerancy, if such a word exists in English. What is striking with pastoralist and nomadic communities is the extent to which these knowledges are very directly tied to the exigencies of life as such, in the sense that they are not separated from the obligation to sustain life indeed and redistribute it. And therefore, knowledge in that sense is not necessarily, let's say, understood in its relationship to power, as you said, or if it is understood in relation to the power to sustain life. Power for what? As opposed to power in and of itself. I also agree with you that the fragmentation of knowledge and the inability we have today to relate different forms of knowledge between themselves is causing a huge obstacle. It's creating a huge obstacle for imagining new forms of action and intervention, to which we should add the fact that our societies are caught in a process of mutation, transformation, which is accelerating every day, and the forms of intervention we imagine on the part are behind those transformations. And that lag, that time lag between the capacity to produce knowledges about new transformations and forms of intervention which rely on exhausted forms of knowledge is only amplifying the crisis. So there's something to do precisely about those forms of knowledges which might be put at the service of substantive democracy. What forms of knowledge do we need? Which are necessary for the sustenance of societies based on life values. I think it's a key issue. One has to, in this case, of course, take seriously the idea that there are different reservoirs of knowledges. Academic knowledge is one thing, but there are many other different forms of expertise and competences which we have to harness if we are to, let's say, go beyond what looks like an impossibility. I take seriously your comments on the community of equals. You make reference, of course, to Rousseau, who, debating on the question of representation, indeed raised some of these issues. I agree with your analysis. The importance of money and the transformation of most liberal democracies, in fact, into plutocratic regimes. We see it in particular in the United States. But in most parts of the West, accountability today, which was supposed indeed to correct the deficiencies of representation, even accountability itself is accountability not to the people, but to rating agencies, when in France, for instance, Macron is faced with a number of decisions, he thinks first to rating agencies and what they will say about France's capacity to borrow on private markets before he thinks about his own citizens. So the capture of accountability by the forces of the market in general and the forces of finance capitalism, capitalism predicated on the existence of platforms, most of which are global in nature, in terms of their reach, most of which are far more resourced than many so-called sovereign states. All of that is really a key issue. I don't know how to solve it. And part of what we are witnessing is, in fact, an increasing grabbing of power for the benefit of those corporations and the subjugation of politics to the whims of finance. And we see it expressed in different forms in our own countries here, where I agree the cost of entry into politics, those costs are getting higher and higher. And exclusion operates precisely through who has money and who doesn't. But what I was really trying to do was not to highlight the impossibilities, what makes it impossible for us to achieve substantive democracy today. I was concentrating on the types of resources we need in order to expand our imagination of what democracy might become. Because part of what contemporary capitalism does, especially in its algorithmic nature, and it's becoming more and more, I mean, it's not like capitalism in the 19th century. It's becoming more algorithmic, more digitalized. It's an entirely different form of capitalism. It's inventing new human beings, if you want, who are not exactly the human beings classical theories of democracy imagined. A human being endowed with reason, capable of making judgments on the basis of that reason, a moral actor, capable of responding, accounting, being responsible for whatever he does or she does. That was the model of the human. Theories of democracy imagined. They cannot, I mean, what we are witnessing, the emergence of an entirely different anthropology, if you want. Human beings today are not what they used to be, and they don't at all correspond to the human being of the agent of the democracy. So that gap, we also have to see how to fill it. Now, there were questions, or comments on the question of sovereignty. I agree with you, Antoinette. I don't have much to say about that. Maybe I used the wrong word when I say tenant. See, what I had in mind was the fact that, first of all, we can't own the earth. Let's see, Jean-Marc and Richard can own une parcelle a piece of land in Cameroon or in Benin. I mean, they can buy it. They have a title deed. But do they really own it? Of course, the legal fiction makes us believe that they own it in the sense that Eric cannot just wake up and go and grab that piece of land and say it's mine. So they are protected in that sense, but they are not protected from the deeper geological, geosocial logic, which makes of each of us what I call in French a passant, that we are just really passers-by. Passers-by because, look, tomorrow, I mean, though some of us are a bit more on that road than others, but the terminus is the same for all. And there's a kind of point at which everything is somewhat symbolically equalized. That is a zone of equality, le trou de l'aiguille, the little hole we have to all pass through, which is death, of course. And when the moment comes to go, I mean, we go naked somewhat. We go back to that elemental moment of our apparition. Because the moment when we come to life, we emerge to life naked. We are not, I mean, no clothes. And we return to life somewhat, to the earth, exactly in the same way. Although saddled with all the trappings contemporary funerals are known for. I don't know if you go to Ghana and you see how people are sent back, it's quite astonishing, splendor. I mean, Eric, you would be astonished that the kind, or for that matter, Richard, these are people who know how to dress up. They are not like me. They really dress up so nicely, like the sapeurs congolais, like the Congolese. So dead people are dressed like the sapeurs. And you should see their coffins. There was a piece recently, I think in The Economist, precisely on that. And we spend lots of money seeing those rituals, sending off rituals. You were mentioning, of course, I mean, the social, but there's the economic cost of all of that. So in spite of all of that, when the time comes to go, you go. Which highlights the precise nature of, I mean, who we are on earth. We are passers-by. Nous sommes des passants. So the question I'm trying to ask is whether we can use these as the starting point for imagining different political theories in a world in which one of the key political categories of belonging is to be a citizen, for instance, as opposed to un habitant, somebody who lives in a place. A citizen is not necessarily that. That's why you have these distinctions, foreigners and anyway. So there are resources that are necessary for rethinking or at least questioning the key political categories that now we understand are leading us to an impasse. How do we expand them in order to include as many voices, many bodies as possible? Since indeed, including as many voices as possible, sharing the earth as much as possible, has become a precondition for its durability. That if we don't share enough, the earth won't be durable. It won't be sustainable. If we keep building walls, excluding question of inequality, it won't last. Because one day, those who are excluded will come to James Baldwin's injunction, next time the fire. That's a very interesting book by the Afro-American James Baldwin. It's called Next Time the Fire. So it's really, at least for those of us we are paid to think, assume, I mean, in spite of all the constraints, how is it that where do we go looking for new intellectual resources which allow us to open up the jacketing of our imagination and to amplify the capacity, our imaginative capacities, when one knows the importance of imagination in human life. So that's really the issue, because a lot of what we experience with forms of rule, modes of economic relations, all of that, media also, it encourages us to relinquish our critical faculties. And I say this in an institution that is devoted precisely to learning. Learning as the project of revitalizing critical faculties so that we can make judgments based on a set of values and some idea of the good, as you were putting it. And this is a political work as well as an intellectual work. I understand it as such. So there's a lot of work to do in terms of rekindling that imagination. Now, Sarah, you put forward two questions. I think, you see, Sarah, what I was, for a long time, I did a lot of work of deconstruction, meaning, okay, which is absolutely important, and we have to keep doing it, that you look into the structures of our existence and you try to identify the fault lines. Where is it that, see, things are really not meeting up? Or what are those fractures? And what explains their existence? How do they operate? What kind of society do they end up, bringing forth? When I started doing the work with the foundation, I realized, or it came to me much more powerfully than before, that we needed to add to that work of deconstruction, we needed to supplement it with une capacité de proposition, a capacity for propositions. Because if we push the deconstructive logic too far, we always end up in some form or the other of impossibility, that nothing can be done, and of defeatism. So we're programmed for defeat because the structures are so huge. The forces against any movement are so hydraulic that nothing really can be done. Nothing matters. Everything is always short of what is needed. And therefore, nothing is to be done. So another mode of critical thinking is to take those forces into account and to begin to wonder, first of all, how we can imagine the real in a different manner, from within a different register. For instance, if we begin looking into, that's where the African archive becomes really interesting. I mean, you take something like music, our musical heritage, the ensemble of musical instruments that we have created, most of which have disappeared, others in museums. We don't use 1/10 of any of that. Not even 1/10. We could enrich the sounds of the world if we were to take them. We could hear sounds the world has never heard if we take seriously our musical sonic library. So you go looking for those locations, instances, reservoirs of forgotten knowledges, to see how they can help to reconstitute the real. Normally that's the work of the artist, but we have to expand it to other areas of human life. Lawyers have to do the same. Engineers, all of us, expanding the canon, if you want, by drawing on the archives of the world, but in particular on those archives that have been either demeaned because people thought they were not interesting, they thought, oh, they don't even exist, or if they exist, they don't matter. That's the revolution we have to make. Because, you know what, the other dominant one is exhausted. There's hardly anything we can find in those archives now if we want to remake the world. And on the other hand, we haven't dealt with ours. Still there. So that's the intellectual project, see, at my age, I'm interested in, since I'm not that far from the door. So, Sarah, that's what, that's, if you want, that's the state of my mind. But you don't need to follow it, I mean, of course. We can talk about that later. But I just want to make it clear, where is it that one is coming from? So how, I mean, I wouldn't be working for the foundation I didn't believe that something can be done. Wouldn't be getting into a marriage with Eric and Julie if we believe that there's nothing to be done. I mean, there's something to be done. We have to find it. We have to find what needs to be done. And in order to find it, we have to open up all the resources, the energies we have. The energies of the mind, the energies of the spiritual world, of which we are so rich in the continent. Very, very rich. Although, of course, it is manipulated, it is instrumentalized, sometimes at our own detriment. But if we were to really reconnect with that reserve of power, then we would turn the continent into a power in reserve, in that dialectic of reserve of power and power in reserve. So that's the historical reading, you see, of our present and our possibilities. So I'm now in the le champ des possibilités. And finally, intellectual freedom. Yes, I mean, look, see, if there's one thing really one cannot capture, it's the mind. there are attempts at capturing it, but you see, there are so many ways in which the mind escapes any attempt at capture. In fact, by definition, it's precisely that where the place where we go looking for all that escapes, capture. So, if we agree with that, then intellectual or academic freedom goes beyond, the strictures of the legal. It means that you can still be free even in captivity. If you read, for instance, I keep giving you stuff to read, Conversations with Myself, which is a powerful text by Nelson Mandela. Not many people refer to it. I mean, when they refer to Mandela's text, they go to Long Walk to Freedom, which is in itself really a magnificent epic. But the most powerful text by Mandela is Conversations with Myself, in which he shows, what it meant to be free in captivity. Because as you know, he went to jail at a young age. They were all young, Sisulu, Kathrada, all of them. In the tradition, in our African tradition of revolutionary politics, where young people have always been there. All of them were young people. Cabral, I can't tell you exactly at what age he died, or was killed, to be precise, but he was probably no more than 40 years. Lumumba, the same thing. Ruben Umyobe, the same thing. Steve Biko, the same thing. It's between 20 and 40. Those who really carried us in the struggle for emancipation. All young people, people of your age. So he went to jail at that age, and then in prison, if you ever go to Robben Island, you'll see his cell. Tiny little thing. Suffocating. Tiny windows, not even windows, you have. And he had to spend most of his time in that little space. So imagine the earth is so large and you are portioned a tiny little space, because of course you can't move. Movement is crippled. A space in which you can easily become crazy, because your mind turns in itself. So you have to face yourself. Conversations with myself. Who is it that I am? Why is it that I'm here? Why am I on earth? What is the purpose? So the book is about that. And you see the extent to which, in fact, he remains free in a world of chains. You see the extent to which in the confrontation with his own demons, that we are somewhat, all of us, inhabited somewhere by dark passions, which can be activated by all kinds of forces. None of us is exempt of that reservoir of dark passions and emotions. Our demons. That unless we confront the demons inside ourselves, we cannot confront the demons of the world. So, you see a process of metamorphosis where you become somebody else through discipline, that he repeats the same things every single day. Discipline which is not the equivalent of repetition. The retraining of one's body in its basic properties. And of course, the attempt at reconciling one's body with one's psyche in order to garner then the strength, inner strength, to stand on one's own feet. Which you did. I mean, after this, just go Google Mandela. Look at the way he stands. Look at the way he addresses the world, responds to the world. Look at the freedom he enjoys and the joy which comes with it. And the extent to which all of these resources are then repurposed for political leadership and the rebuilding of a political community beyond race categories. That's why something happened in South Africa. Whatever we believe, however we critique its limits, which is absolutely crucial for this world in which genocides are back, wars of racial extermination are back. That there's something else, there's a different type of possibility. But to achieve it, we need to do the work. We need to do the work on ourselves. And this work is, by definition, intellectual. But it's also spiritual, if you may allow me such a term, but I think it is allowed, especially in this space. So, we won't escape that obligation to rethink our relation with the immaterial. In an age when we are all turned into objects, to be bought and sold. An age when value lies in the capacity to buy and sell, to be bought and to be sold. All of which is epitomized precisely by this utensil of self-congratulation, which is the cell phone, and the mirror, the big mirror, which has captured all of us. That the big instrument of capture today is this mirror. So how do we escape the mirror? How do we relate to the mirror in a way which doesn't turn us into prisoners, not of the earth, but of the mirror? I think those are the kinds of questions we have to be asking, and we have to drive the energies of our young people into these kinds of fields in order to reinvent the continent. But maybe this is just one of those crazy utopias, that pop up once in a while. But I'm really happy to be living in that space. And I wish many of us could share it. So can we stop here? I'm exhausted.
As it almost, it so often happens with great discourses, time trudges along, might as, even though we may so much want it to stay here. Thank you, Prof, for giving us a certain moment of transfiguration. as we I can't help in the imagery of the term to say, could we put up a tent and keep listening? Maybe 2, maybe 3. The materiality of this world doesn't always capture appreciation. Nonetheless, we subscribe to this convention and ask that you please accept these materials. May they encapsulate our sense of thank you, our sense of appreciation, and may they remind you of your own definition of ancestor. You've been accountable to us and you've made us accountable. You've given us a project. And so, Prof, allow us to are we coming here to? Oh, before we give him? Yes, please.
Just one thing about Jorge's question on sovereignty and the sovereign. Yeah, it's. I was thinking of the sovereignty of the people, because in a democracy, the sovereign are the people. The sovereign whom the people trust is something else, but meaning the sovereignty of the people. Then something the professor said about the wars, that we have to bring the arms down. Yeah, it's fundamental. It's urgent. It's like needed, like yesterday. But provided we understand that these wars that we are witnessing are market wars. They are not wars for sovereignty. They are wars for profit, for money. Yeah. Thank you. I'll be very happy to hand in the gift on behalf of all of us. Thank you so much, Professor.
Oh, yes. Yes, maybe with the background of the...
With the background of the banner. So this is we are in Kenya. So this is a Maasai shoe. Yes, and it's the perfect gift now for the weather. Perfect gift for the weather. Yeah?
And so it is my great honor to invite you to come to a close. Allow me to just ask 2 gentlemen to give us very brief words. Eric, as our host, as our partner today, and Richard, please, just one word to close this moment as we head off for lunch. Okay. Is there a mic? You might as well.
Before I say good afternoon, I would like to recognize Strathmore as an institution, particularly the two directors, and to thank them for hosting us and giving us this opportunity to speak to each other. Secondly, I would like to recognize our esteemed Professor Achille Mbembe for the time, for the wisdom, for the knowledge, and for the challenge that he's left with us, and just agreeing that he could do this on a short notice in a busy schedule. Thanks, Prof. I would also like to thank IFD family, Dr. McCon, John Mark, Cheptum, Nadi, and the whole team for putting this together. It is not very easy to bring Africa together in a moment of reckoning like this. I'd also like to thank my colleagues, Julie, Beatrice, Thuku, and the rest I may not mention by name, for having worked alongside IFD team to bring this to fruition. Having said that, I would like to just give a view of what I think I have listened to. It could be mine, it could be universal, but the first thing is to say that I am happy that you are deepening democracy at this moment in time. And in our deepening, we realize that we are becoming, meaning we are work in progress, and so is democracy. But in our progression, we have been called and challenged to do a few things. So one, we've been called and challenged to build relationships with the earth that holds us, or nature, that holds us, institutions, processes, and connectedness, not out of fluidity, but value, culture, custom, character, and tenets that address and sustain humanity. And humanity, in my understanding, is being the likely universality of equality, equity, freedom, rights, and dignity. We are challenged to recreate and decenter the narrative of what democracy is in Africa, with durability and sustainability demanding that we conquer the mimicry of the West, include exploiting the significance of radical decolonization. We are challenged not to be boxed into concepts and practices that fail to point us to and unite us with the desire to find and critique and renew our fountain of the ecosystem of knowledge that thrive on multiplicity as a pathway of becoming. In conclusion, democracy must be found, must be filled, must be fashioned and funded by us to advance and sustain the community of life in forms that uphold dignity and quality in our context. And therefore, because the earth is our home, we are behoved to abhor violence, and therefore take care of our common home, as the Greeks will say, to koino mas speliti. Thank you.
Good morning. My words is a word of gratitude to Strathmore University, which so generously welcomed us this morning for this public lecture by Prof Achille Mbembe, our General Director. The link between our foundation and the academic world is umbilical ontological, fusional, and strategic. First, because our foundation was created by academics, by an academic, a famous one of the most famous also of the world and this century, our professor, our chief, Prof Achille Mbembe. And because of the president of our board is also a famous academic, the Professor Suleiman Bashir Jagne. Lastly, in this first point, the majority of our board is made up and constituted by academics. The second reason of this particular relationship between our foundation and the academic world is because our foundation is hosted by an university, a major one in the sub-Saharan world, in the sub-Saharan Africa, the University of it in Johannesburg. This relationship is also justified by the fact that our mission and the same of the mission of university. Those are teaching, research, consulting, and development support. The third and finally reason is because the topics we work on are the same topic that are the deep interest of the university world. We will work on governance and democracy. My hope as the regional coordinator of the Innovation Foundation for Democracy is that this relationship with the Kenyan universities in general and with Strathmore University, which is hosting us today, will become consolidated, strengthened, and more productive in the coming days. We can plan conferences. We can plan conferences like this one we just had, symposia, seminar, or research program in the topic related to democracy. It is with this expectation that once again I extend my thanks to our partner, ICG, with whom we held this important program, and I extend my thanks to Strathmore University. May Inter-African Cooperation live, may democracy live, and may Africa be radiant and powerful. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Eric, Richard. Two quick housekeeping announcements. The first, we would be most thankful if we could go to the front of the building to have a group photo just after this. Okay, so if we could all just proceed to the front of the building for a group photo, after which Prof spoke about the utensils of life. There are certain utensils on the second floor that are filled with what will nourish us for life. So you're most welcome for lunch on the second floor at Mara Restaurant. So group photo, then lunch. I close with the juiciest two accolades of Prof Mbembe. He has received the Holberg Prize in 2024 for his pioneering work in African history, post-colonial studies, social sciences for the last 4 decades. And, which is always a great pleasure for us academics, his latest book, 2023, La Communauté Terrestre. juices, the fruits of a prof. Thank you. My name is Humphrey Sipala. I teach at Kabarak Law, and I run Kabarak University Press. It's been an honor. Thank you so much, everyone. Group photo.